happened when I was 14, on Christmas Eve 2006. My parents had gone out for a late night church service, leaving me home alone. It wasn't unusual. We lived in a quiet, safe neighborhood in rural Illinois, the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and trusted their neighbors. They promised to be back by midnight, and since I was too cool to go with them, I stayed home to wrap the last of the presents and binge-watch some cheesy Christmas specials. The house felt peaceful, lit only by the warm glow of the Christmas tree and the occasional soft hum of the heater kicking on. Around 10:30, as I was finishing up the last gift, I heard a noise outside. A crunch. It was faint but distinct, the sound of boots on snow. I froze, scissors in hand, and strained to listen. For a moment, everything was silent again. I brushed it off, assuming it was a stray deer or maybe the neighbor's dog. But then, a second noise came. A soft, metallic clink, like something brushing against the side of the house. Now I was nervous. I got up and walked to the front window, pushing aside the curtain just enough to peek outside. The yard was empty, blanketed in fresh snow that sparkled under the porch light. I didn't see any footprints, but my eyes were drawn to the driveway. The side gate to our backyard was open. That gate was always closed. My heart started pounding as I stared at the dark opening. I turned off the Christmas tree lights, hoping the darkness would make it harder for anyone outside to see in, and grabbed the cordless phone from the kitchen. My first thought was to call my parents, but I stopped myself. I didn't want them to think I couldn't handle being home alone. Instead, I locked all the doors and went back to the living room, convincing myself it was just the wind. Minutes later, I heard another sound, a creak. This one wasn't outside. It was the floorboards in the hallway, just past the living room. I froze, my grip tightening on the phone. For a second, I thought I'd imagined it. But then it came again, another creak, closer this time. Someone was in the house. I grabbed the fireplace poker, my hands trembling. I crouched behind the couch. My mind was racing. Did I lock the back door? I couldn't remember. I heard the soft sound of breathing, slow and shallow. Whoever it was, they were standing just outside the living room now. I wanted to scream, but fear kept me silent. And then I saw him. A man stepped into the living room, his face half hidden by a ski mask. He was tall, wearing a heavy coat and gloves. He held a crowbar in one hand. He moved slowly, scanning the room, his eyes darting over the dark corners like he was searching for something. Or someone. I pressed myself tighter against the couch, praying he wouldn't see me. He walked past the tree, the faint glow of the porch light catching the edge of the crowbar. He stopped in the center of the room, tilting his head as if listening. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. Suddenly, the phone in my hand beeped. The battery was dying. The man's head snapped in my direction, and I knew I was caught. I bolted from my hiding spot, sprinting toward the kitchen. I heard him shout, his heavy boots thumping against the floor as he chased after me. I slammed the kitchen door shut behind me and shoved a chair under the doorknob, my hands shaking so badly I could barely manage it. He pounded on the door, the wood rattling under each blow.
"Open the door!"
he shouted, his voice deep and angry. I scrambled to the phone on the wall and dialed 911. My voice was shaking as I gave the operator my address and told her someone had broken in. The pounding stopped. For a moment, there was silence, and I thought maybe he'd given up. But then I heard a new sound, the sliding glass door in the dining room. I had forgotten to lock it. I grabbed a knife from the counter and backed into the pantry, pressing myself against the shelves. My heart was racing so fast I thought I might pass out. I could hear him moving through the dining room, his footsteps steady and methodical. "I know you're here," he said, his voice almost sing-song. The pantry door creaked open. I screamed and swung the knife wildly, catching him on the arm. He cursed and stumbled back, clutching his sleeve, but he didn't stop. He lunged for me, grabbing my wrist and slamming me against the shelves. I fought as hard as I could, kicking and thrashing, but he was too strong. Suddenly, headlights flooded the room. The man froze, his grip loosening just enough for me to break free. My parents had pulled into the driveway. The man swore under his breath and bolted for the back door. I ran to my parents, sobbing, as the man disappeared into the night. The police arrived within minutes, but they never found him. To this day, I can still hear his voice, low and taunting, telling me he knew I was there. Every Christmas Eve, I double-check every lock in the house and leave the lights on all night. I don't think I'll ever feel safe in the dark again. The story takes place 4 years ago, and it still haunts me to this day. It was Christmas night, and my family was driving home from a fancy restaurant. I, unlike my family, wasn't tired, so the 45-minute drive seemed perpetual. On top of that, my little sister was constantly moaning about how her friend didn't get her anything for Christmas. After about 20 minutes of driving, my dad stopped at a gas station to get some cigarettes, and my sister, brother, and mother all got out to use the bathroom. I stayed in the car as I had already gone before we left. Once they all left, I decided to play a few games on my phone. I looked at the car clock and saw that about 10 minutes had passed, so I immediately wondered what was taking them so long. As soon as I peered out the car window, I saw a man staring at our car. The man startled me as I didn't know how long he'd been watching. What made it even more unnerving is that he had a plain, blank face, no expression at all. It was hard to make out any features as it was pretty dark, and he wasn't standing in an illuminated part of the station. He was about 5'9" and appeared to be middle-aged. Once he saw me notice him, he started walking toward the car, and I'd be lying to you if I said I wasn't scared. Luckily, my dad came back with the rest of the family, just as the man took a couple of steps. My dad apologized and told me he'd been in an argument with the cashier. I didn't care. I was just glad my dad was with me. I took another glance at the man outside, and he was still staring. This time, he had an annoyed look on his face. We drove off, and for the rest of the car ride, I couldn't stop thinking about that man. This wouldn't have been too bad if it had ended there, but it didn't. Later that night, I was watching YouTube while everyone else slept. Luckily for me, a storm was raging over us. I enjoy storms. They make me feel cozy as I lay in bed. I put my phone down and just enjoyed the ambience. That didn't last for long. I heard something smash into the window behind me. I lurched forward and nearly fell out of the bed. I thought a bird had smashed into the window. I parted the blinds, and what I saw next haunted me. I saw a man standing by my parents' car, looking up at my room. I took a closer look, and I nearly had a heart attack. It was the same man I saw at the gas station, only this time, when our eyes met, he grinned. Being the 14-year-old I was, I did the manly thing and screamed at the top of my lungs. My dad came running up the stairs and entered my room.
"Why the f*** are you screaming?"
He said. I told him about the man and explained everything that had happened. My dad grabbed a baseball bat and told me to call the police. After 10 minutes, the police arrived at our house and found the man in our shed. He was arrested, and that was the last time I saw him. The next day, my dad inspected the house, and we found the handle of our back door had been damaged, but not completely broken. This gives me an eerie feeling because if he had actually managed to get in, he could have harmed us, or possibly killed us. It was Christmas Eve, 2002, and I was 8 years old. My family lived in a small house in upstate New York, the kind of town where snow blanketed everything by late November. My parents, my 10-year-old sister Emma, and I were always big on Christmas traditions. Baking cookies, leaving milk out for Santa, the works. That night, my parents tucked us into bed around 9 p.m, reminding us to stay put until morning if we wanted Santa to visit. I don't know why I woke up. I wasn't dreaming, and the house was quiet. When I opened my eyes, the red numbers on my alarm clock glowed 1:24 a.m. The excitement of Christmas morning should have been enough to keep me in bed, but something felt wrong. off. It wasn't anything I could explain. It was just a quiet, creeping unease, like the kind you feel when someone's standing too close. The living room was right below my bedroom, and when I sat up, I heard movement. The sound of heavy boots on a wooden floor. My first thought was Santa. My second thought, which came just a second later, was, why is Santa moving around so loudly? I crept out of bed as quietly as I could. The hallway was dark, lit only by the faint glow of the Christmas lights outside. My parents' room was at the far end, their door closed. Emma's was right across the hall, but her door was cracked open, and I could hear her snoring softly. The noises from downstairs continued, shuffling footsteps, followed by the rustle of something plastic. Wrapping paper? Maybe. I told myself it had to be Santa. Who else would it be? I crept to the top of the stairs and crouched, gripping the railing. I could see just a slither of the living room from there, the twinkling Christmas tree lights, the pile of presents beneath it, and someone's shadow moving across the far wall.
Santa?
I whispered. The movement stopped instantly. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Then, slowly, a man stepped into view. He was wearing a Santa suit, but it looked cheap and dirty, like the kind you'd buy at a dollar store. His fake white beard was uneven, and his hat sat crooked on his head. His face was pale, and his eyes. There was something wrong about his eyes. They were too wide, too alert, darting around like he was waiting for something to jump out at him. When he saw me, he smiled.
Ho ho ho,
He said, but his voice was flat, almost like he was mocking the words.
you're awake, huh? You're not really supposed to see me, little guy.
I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My hands were gripping the railing so tightly they hurt.
Come on down.
He said, beckoning me with one gloved hand.
Don't you want to see what Santa brought you?
I shook my head. His smile faltered for just a second, but then it came back, wider this time. He knelt down on one knee, like he was trying to look friendly.
Don't be shy.
He said,
I got something real special for you. A present I saved just for you.
Something about the way he said that made my stomach turn. I took a step back, and his face changed. The fake friendliness dropped away completely, and what replaced it was cold, hungry.
You don't want to make Santa angry, do you?
He said, his voice lower now. I backed up another step, my heel brushing the edge of Emma's door. She stirred but didn't wake up. The man straightened up, still staring at me, and took a step toward the stairs. That's when I bolted. I ran into Emma's room and slammed the door shut behind me. She sat up, groggy and confused, as I locked the door and pressed my back against it.
Charlie, what are you
I whispered.
There's someone in the house.
Her eyes went wide, and she started to say something, but then we both heard it, the sound of boots on the stairs. Slowly, purposefully, one step at a time,
Where are you, little guy?
the man called out. Emma grabbed my hand, and we climbed into her closet, pulling the door shut as quietly as we could. It was a tiny space, crammed with clothes and toys, and we crouched together in the dark, barely breathing. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs.
You think you can hide from Santa?
He said. I could hear him moving down the hall now, opening doors. First my room, then the bathroom. He stopped outside Emma's door. I could see his shadow through the crack under the closet door, long and stretched out by the Christmas lights outside. The doorknob rattled.
Come on.
He said, his voice low and melodic.
Come out and see what I've got for you.
Emma squeezed my hand so tightly it hurt. The door creaked open. I held my breath, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it through the closet. He stepped into the room. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he laughed, soft and low.
You're in here.
He said.
I can smell you.
He walked toward the closet. The floorboards creaked right in front of us. Then, suddenly...
Hey!
It was my dad's voice, booming from the hallway. The man froze, and I heard him mutter something under his breath. Then there was a loud crash, like something being knocked over, and heavy footsteps pounding down the stairs. Emma and I stayed in the closet until my dad came and got us. By the time the police arrived, the man was gone. They found muddy boot prints in the living room, leading out the back door and into the woods. A torn piece of red fabric from his suit was caught on the back gate. We never saw him again. And now, all these years later, when I see a Christmas suit, I can't help but think of that night.